Hello, folks. Oh, I'm glad to see you here. You know, Ma, every time you bake a pie, I say to myself, this is the best pie we ever had. Until the next time. And then, by gracious, you do it again. Now, this pie here looks as though I put my foot in it. I didn't know that you and Jim were on the outs, or I wouldn't have said anything about it.
It's all right, Dad.
Just the same, I think you'll go a long way before you find a steadier fellow than Jim Clark.
If I were you, Frank Ashley, I'd keep quiet about Jim Clark. The trouble's all your fault anyway.
My fault? What'd I have to do about it?
Never mind. Skip.
Now, see here, girl. I like Jim Clark. I like to have you going around with him. Of course, he never comes around here much. But I feel a whole lot better when you're out with him than some of those drugstore cowboys that are calling you up all the time. Now, if I've had anything to do about it, I'd like to know what it's all about.
It's not your fault, Dad. It's just between Jim and me. Just that Jim and I have decided to split up. That's that.
Well, that's that, is it? When our daughter is ashamed to invite a fine young man to her own home, I think it's more than just that, and you ought to do something about it. For 20 years, we've lived in this house, and not one thing has been done to it since the day we moved in. This old linoleum out here is so frayed, it's a wonder I don't break my neck.
Oh, it's all right, Pa. She's not hurt. She's just mad.
Jody, you come in the next room with me and tell me all about it, huh? You kids go help your mother.
Okay, Pa. But say, if I were you, I wouldn't drop that apple peel on the rug tonight.
I'll tend to the apple peel. You help your mother. Now, Dodie, you tell your dad your troubles.
Well, Dad, it's sort of silly when you talk about it. But it's just that this place is so shabby and run down. And most of the girls have homes that are so much nicer than ours. I was embarrassed to have him come here. But he didn't understand. He thought it was strange I always wanted to go out to the movies or to Ethel's house. I guess he thought all I cared about him was just to have him take me out someplace. But I didn't like him well enough to just sit home and talk. You know what I mean, don't you, Dad? Told you it was silly. Anyway, we don't see each other anymore. Daddy, it's just awful.
Folks, that scene you just watched took place in this very room just a little over 2 years ago. Believe me, it didn't make me feel any too good to know that I let my kids down that way. But hang it all, I didn't know what I could do. It had me worried, plenty worried. You know what I mean? Then one day when I was eating lunch with Bill Kennedy, I remembered he'd fixed his place up something swell. And while I'm not one to poke my nose in another man's business, I knew Bill well enough to ask him how he did it. That's how I found out about this FHA. That very afternoon, on the way home from work, I stopped in at one of the places that had an FHA sign. The fellow in there told me I could borrow money to repair and remodel a house on what they call a modernization plan. Pay it back a few dollars a month. He gave me some of the folders about it. By that time, I was so excited that I almost ran home to Ma. You know, she's not always cranky like she was that night Mary was so upset. As a matter of fact, she was just as much of a kid as I was about looking at those folders and talking and planning about what we could do. Just let me show you what we did. We made a lot of changes in the living room, papering and painting. We built in that window seat and changed things so we could have that big window. Ma loves it. Every night she stands and looks out over the valley for a few minutes before we settle down for the evening. Then I put in that big plate glass mirror over the fireplace. Makes the room look about twice as big. Now, Ma will tell you that she likes the registers as well as anything. Likes them because they send heat to every corner of the house, and dirt doesn't come out anymore to streak up the walls. She says she can't tell you how long it's been since she had to wash the curtains. Upstairs, we remodeled the bathroom. This Vitrolite glass is another one of Ma's pets. She says it gives the room color, keeps new looking, and is easy to clean. Then here's the built-in medicine cabinet with plate glass mirror and the trick shaving light so I can really see myself when I shave. Then downstairs, as I said, we repapered and painted the dining room, put in some new lights and did some other things. And even so, it only cost us about $18 a month. Believe me, after it was all done, mealtime was a lot more cheerful in our house. Matter of fact, all times were more cheerful. And it wasn't long before Jim Clark had his feet under our table. Pretty regular, too. Know what I mean? As a matter of fact, it wasn't long before Ma was making me spend a lot of my evening in the kitchen. It seemed that Mary and Jim thought that window seat was their special place. Seems like they had an awful lot to talk about. Then the first thing you knew, they were talking to Ma and me about getting married.
Of course, we'd like to get married right away. The rent on any apartment I'd want Mary to have is higher than I can afford.
Uh-huh. Son, did you ever think about buying a house?
Buying a house?
Dad, are you crazy?
It always makes me laugh at you kids nowadays when you talk as though you knew all about everything. Then something like this comes along. Something important. Something that's happening right under your very nose and you don't know anything about it. You don't have to be rich nowadays to buy a house.
Well, you've got to have a lot more money than I've got. I know that.
No, you don't. Now, you tell me you have a few $100s saved up. Well, that ought to be more than enough to put you two in a home as soon as you get married. Ma, where are those folders we got when we fixed up the house?
You left them scattered around the living room. I put them away in the desk.
It's all in those folders. You see, under this FHA plan, you can buy or build a house for a small down payment. The balance you pay off every month, like rent. It probably amounts to less than $1 a day.
Oh, Jim, those are swell. Look at that one. And that one.
Say, maybe we could buy one of these. You know, Joe Johnson bought one, and he doesn't make any more than I do. Do you suppose?
Oh, Jim, if we only could.
That's all Jim needed to know. For the next few Sundays, we spent just about all our time looking at houses, and believe me, we saw some mighty pretty ones. Every once in a while, we'd stop and look one over good, and something that we noticed was the way people are going in for more windows and bigger windows. I guess they figured out that sunshine and fresh air have a lot to do with making a home more cheerful and easier to live in. I want to tell you that whoever designed those houses had the same idea in mind that I had. It made you feel good just to look at them. You see, it's this way. You and I and everyone else, we're all pretty busy these days, working for our country's defense and doing other jobs. It gives a man a chance to buy the most secure thing in the world, an American home. What used to be just rent money now becomes a man's investment in himself and his family. See what I mean? On one street, we found a house that wasn't quite finished that the kids seemed to like pretty well. So we all piled out of the car to take a closer look at it. Jim was interested in getting a lot of facts and figures from the fellow who built the house. And as soon as we got inside, he started to look for all the things that we'd seen and liked in other houses. First off, we got started talking about the fine big windows. Mary was all excited about how pretty she could fix them. But Jim was more interested in the fact that all the windows had storm sash. That keeps in the heat and cold weather. Ma said with so many windows, a person could see to so any place in the house. Then they went off to look at some other things, but Jim kept figuring. He wanted to be sure they could afford to run the house as well as buy it. Then this fellow waltzes us up to the attic to show us the insulation made of glass fiber. It keeps in the heat during cold weather and keeps the heat out during hot weather. The man said many builders were sort of standardizing on this fiberglass insulation because they could count on always getting the same quality. I was interested in all this scientific stuff, but Jim, he wanted to get back to his figures. So this fellow explained how the glass insulation and the storm sash cut the cost of heating. The saving you could make easily amounts to a month's payment on the house during the course of a year, and in addition, the home would be more comfortable, not have any drafts. So he took us down to show us another saving. Because heat couldn't leak out of the house, you could use a smaller furnace. Mary went along with us to look at the furnace. She wanted to be sure it had the same kind of dirt and dust-stopping filters we had in ours. She knew how much more comfortable they'd made our house and how much they cut down on cleaning. Mary was checking up on everything and found a lot of things she liked. One thing special that seemed to catch her fancy was the way the living room was separated from the dinette with good-looking glass doors. Looked kind of like Venetian blinds. I suppose you can guess the rest of the story. A few days later, Jim went down to see the fellow at the place where the FHA sign was. The man he talked to explained that remodel, buy or build, it was all the same to them. They were glad to help people get better homes. He told Jim that when the FHA insures a loan on a new home, it checks over the plans and specifications, the design, location, and once these are approved, Jim simply signs to pay so much a month, just like rent. He showed Jim pictures of some of the architect-planned houses that had been built that way and explained that the FHA checks up several times while the house is being built, checks on construction and on the house when it's finished to see if the plans and specifications have been carried out. Once Jim got started, believe me, things rolled fast. Those kids got that home and had it ready to move into right after they were married. And that's just about 2 years ago. What's it like? Well, I tell you. It's just a little white house. Sits far enough back from the street so that Jim's got a lawn to cut. On the inside, after dinner, we usually find Jim and Mary back in the kitchen and say, you ought to see that kitchen. Everything in it, spick and span and up to the minute. It's got everything you could think of, and then some. And they've got something else here that we're all mighty proud of, too. Yes, sir. It's my granddaughter. She's almost a year old, and say that child is so smart, well, that's another story. Mary's got Jim so well trained that after 2 years, he still dries the dishes. But I guess even a man don't mind drying the dishes in the kitchen like this. The only bad part of the whole setup is that they put the baby to bed so early, I can't get over to play with it after work. Anyway, Mary says it's not good to play with it before bedtime. Funny how she learned so much more in 2 years than Ma and I did in 25. They've got 2 bedrooms. One of them they use as a nursery for little Mary. And our Mary has fixed it up real pretty with nursery rhyme wallpaper and all kinds of cute pictures and things. This is going to be little Mary's room when she grows up, too. And they've got a little dressing table with a mirror built on the back of the closet door that she'll find real handy someday. In Mary and Jim's room, they have a triple plate glass mirror. Ma's already trying to have me get one like it for our house, so she'll be able to tell if the seams of her stockings are straight or if her slip is showing. Oh, well, you know how women are, and we love them for it. And their living room. Well, I tell you, their living room is something. Big windows make the room seem larger and more cheerful, and it's always comfortable, never any drafts. Maybe that's why little Mary has gone through her first winter without the sign of a cold. Even after 2 years, you can hardly pry Jim away from this fine place in the evening to go bowling. The 2 of them are perfectly happy to sit there, and they're proud to have their friends come in to show off all the happiness they've worked out for themselves. That's the story of my house. How it helped 2 young people get started with their house, and how it keeps them going on the right basis. But let me tell you something. Jim and I didn't do anything that you or anyone else in this country couldn't do with a little help from the FHA. For nowhere else in this world today can anyone find so much contentment and happiness and security as you can right here when America designs for happiness. Know what I mean?